Comfortable?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hi, Dave. Okay, so how I've been doing these things, the name of the podcast is called Credible. So starting out with, my question to you is, what is your credibility? Start by just introducing yourself a little bit.
Okay. So, David Poole, and I run a business called Sales Geek, which does a number of things. But essentially, we try and bring mine and my colleagues' experience of multiple decades in big corporate sales. So we've all worked for big multinationals, and we're trying to democratize that knowledge and experience and bring it to small and medium customers who normally can't afford the experience that we have. So we sell it to them on a part-time basis. And we bring tried and tested process, experience, strategies, and make them available to anybody that wants them.
I think also this gave me an idea for my follow-up question for one of the questions you've got for me as well. Isn't sales marketing and vice versa? What is the difference? Because I think that's definitely like something from when I got started to where I am now, and conversations I have with the kind of things that I'm trying to offer as well, there definitely is a bit of a gap in knowledge there, I think.
So one of the things I've realised, I spent a lot of time almost tearing my hair out with business owners who seem to have conflated sales and marketing as being one and the same thing. And I don't agree with the fact that sales and marketing are one and the same thing. But I also have come to understand and accept that the smaller the business is, the closer they are together. And quite often when you're a startup and it's just you or you and a business partner, sales and marketing, the Venn diagram, the amount of overlap is almost extreme. It's almost like a total eclipse, the Venn diagram, where it's all one thing. But I was speaking to somebody a few months ago who said that his sales strategy is paid clicks on Google. And I said, no, that's marketing. And it took me ages and ages and ages to unlock for this chap that although the pay-per-click generates inquiries, he hadn't realised that the bit he does afterwards is selling, and that the bit that comes before is marketing. He just saw it all as sales. So sometimes it's a definition thing, but I also think the bigger the organisation gets, the more that Venn diagram sort of pulls apart and the overlap becomes less and less. So I think they are two distinct things.
So that was going to be one of my questions on that is, he's pulling traffic through pay-per-click. Is it just purely transactional, or does it require some of his time to actually have that conversation?
No, it does. It absolutely does. So the inquiry comes in, the customer fills out a form, and the inquiry comes in, and then a human dialogue between two people, typically voice rather than email or text or chat or whatever, happens. And in that crucible happens some selling. But this individual hadn't just defined that in his mind.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's always interesting is that new business owners, because they have to be the sales and marketing person for the business at the outset, often struggle to stop being the sales and marketing person as the business grows. And that's often where Sales Geek can come in and help them get some definition in what they're trying to do.
No, for sure, because I think especially as the business starts to grow as well, there's that problem, especially if it's a really personable service. It's hard, not just from the owner's perspective, but I think also from their client's perspective. They want to deal with who they're aware of. So actually then building it into something where it's more of an operation and you can introduce that to team, which is not just with the individual, but that's also where your skill set comes in as well, being able to strengthen that as an overall service of how you can do that. Obviously really important. But from that, what are the main things, I guess, that you can bring into an organization, or I suppose even from an individual just trying to scale? What are the main things that people do wrong that they really need help with, that almost is like the most common things that you at least start with? What can you do for people that's going to really significantly improve that for them?
It's massively variable depending upon the business that we're dealing with. I'm dealing with a business at the moment. It's a recruitment agency. They've got to 12 million, done a fantastic job. As the business has expanded, they've recruited a sales team. So at the startup point, it was a partnership. There's now a team of, I think, about 12, 13 people. They're doing really well. They've hired a sales team. The sales team isn't delivering the results that the owners managed to achieve themselves. So the owners are still being the sales force. They're busy working in the business rather than on the business. And so part of my job is to be parachuted in and to more clearly define those lines, help the salespeople understand what it is they need to do, how they need to go about doing it, but also probably to help the business owner understand that in the short term, the sales team probably won't do it as well as they did because it's their baby. They understand the business inside out. Once you start having several steps removed from the heartbeat of the business, it's unreasonable to expect the sales team to have as good a grasp of what the business is about and also the autonomy to make decisions in front of a customer. I always remember many years ago finding that when I took my sales director into customer appointments, they would close the deal really quickly. In part, that was because they had the autonomy to apply a discount or flex something in the contract or make a decision, whereas I would have had to come away cap in hand to win the internal negotiation to then go back, and that lost momentum in the sale. A sales team working for a business owner is always, by definition, slightly less empowered than the business owner. And so we want to try and improve that empowerment, but we also want to try and get the business owner to just accept that they are less empowered. They're always going to be. So the outcomes are probably going to be slightly less, but they facilitate the business owner to go away and work elsewhere on other parts of the business.
Is there a way that you can empower them more? Is it, because you mentioned offers, is it, because where I'm trying to go with this as well is, how much of it is the experience and skill of the individual and how much of it is the operation and that as a system that someone's following?
It's a mixture of both. Many years ago, I was working for a very big corporation and we used to have a weekly deal review. And that weekly deal review was actually a piece of theatre in that the majority of the deals that came for review for us to see, right, is it the right fit for us? Is it the right price? Is it operationally a good fit? We used to go through this whole process of the salesperson having to come and win that internal argument. And we would 9 times out of 10 approve the deal. But what we were doing in the process was very publicly showing the sales force, who all had to witness the deal review, what the workings of the business was. So we were trying to get them to understand that the component parts of the deal we were putting together looked like this, and this. Mm-hmm. So whilst the price might have been right, it might have been a bad operational fit or a great one. Or in some cases, to help people understand, we were willing to discount deeper on something because it had operational synergies. So that's that piece that I was talking about previously, where it's unreasonable to expect a salesperson to have absolute oversight of every other part of the business and understand the cogs and the springs of how that works. And so as a result, they are a bit less agile. But one of the things that we try and do is encourage almost a round table review of things, because then you're sort of cross-functionally educating the sales team, but also the sales team are educating the operational team on what's going on in the market, what's going on in the business, and hopefully it makes them more empowered to do the deal. But the reality is the salesperson's always a step away from being the business owner, and so they're always going to be slightly less empowered.
So for anyone listening to this, let's say a business owner's listening to this, they're just getting started or they're at least in a comfortable position and they just want to know, kind of like in the same way as when we started having a conversation, I had some experience with it. You've really helped guide me and just give me that little bit of validation that you're not really doing anything wrong, because it is just, in many respects, it's having that conversation with people. There's a strategy behind it, sure. But anyone listening to this, is there any way that you could summarize the sort of the basics? If you could give them a to-do list of the do's and the don'ts. What's just good housekeeping for sales?
Okay. So sales is a numbers game. That's no revelation from me.
That's something that definitely resonated massively with me, because I was kicking my ass for I think that's where I was feeling am I going wrong? Especially with when you've got to pick up the phone or you feel like you're pestering people by sending messages. It is a numbers game. That's one of the biggest things that really made a difference to.
It is a numbers game, and if you think about the world, the world has broadly as a construct has leaders in pretty much every situation, whether it's political leaders, whether it's military leaders, or whether it's a team leader in an inside sales team or a customer service team. And we're used to that pyramid hierarchical sort of structure. When you're a new business owner, and if you're a sole trader, or if you're in a partnership, and partnerships are normally fairly equal, what you gain is autonomy and what you lose is accountability. And so sales is a numbers game. And what I mean by that is that you have to buy enough raffle tickets to win enough prizes to run the business. And when you and I first started talking, I don't think I've told you anything that you didn't know. But the one thing that I think I brought to the table was every week I would come to you and say, show me your numbers. And in the weeks when I wasn't doing that, the only person you were letting down was yourself, maybe your business partner, possibly people that work for you were unaware that you haven't been doing the activity that you promised yourself that you were going to do. Yeah. But on a Friday morning when you and I speak and I say, right, what's got into your pipeline? There'll be some weeks when you've done it brilliantly. There'd be some weeks when you were somewhat apologetic for saying, I haven't done as much as I could. But even that was pricking your conscience to do that little bit more. So one of the things that we find ourselves doing time and time again is not giving people eureka moments in terms of activity is key, making sure that the pipeline's full of truth rather than dreams. It's just asking almost those managerial questions that you would be asked if you were the salesperson for a marketing company as an employee, but because you're the owner, nobody's asking you those questions.
Yeah.
So that's one of the key things that we bring to the table. Now, of course, we bring other complexities and experiences, but accountability for activity is massively, massively underrated, and that's one of the foundations of our success.
No, for sure. And I think, like on what you just said there, it's the activities of firstly filling your pipeline with those conversations. That's for sure one of the biggest things I've found challenging, which I suppose we can come on to a little bit later, because then that's where marketing comes in a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And that the problem there is traffic. How are you actually getting that traffic? How are you getting those conversations? Because I know me and you have slightly overlapping strategies for how we've been doing it, quite a lot of manual efforts. But what... In your mind then, filling that pipeline, because I suppose once you've got everyone there, it's fairly easy then for you to just have those conversations, check that data, see how you can be improving. Anyone who's sort of listening to this thinking, okay, that's all well and good, but like, how am I supposed to increase these numbers? Number one challenge, I would say. What are your thoughts on that? Aside from like spending money on it, what do you think?
I think you have to find what hill you're going to stand on in terms of being seen. Now, that can be advertising. It can be a branding effort. It can be selling yourself. It can be face-to-face networking. It can be recording snippets for a podcast, right? There's a million ways to create a profile. But what I've learned, and bear in mind, for the 25 odd years that I was working in big corporate, probably only the first 7 or 8 of that I was on the front line selling. I was in leadership beyond that and didn't really have to do it anymore. One of the big things that I've had to learn again is that you have to ask people. So if I go to a networking event or to a conference or a seminar or whatever, I actually have to set myself KPIs, which is I'm going to come away from this meeting with 20 business cards and 4 or 5 one-to-one meetings. When I ask people face to face, if I'm, as I am with you now, it would be really great for us to catch up and have a chat. I have yet to have a single person say, no, I don't want to do that. It just doesn't happen. Our inherent politeness means that people go, yeah, I'll give you half an hour of my time. When you start sending that out via email, your success rate massively drops. I've found over time on LinkedIn that if I become connected with somebody, observe them looking around my profile and then send a request, it's not as successful as requesting it face to face in the flesh, but it's still probably got about a 60-70% success rate. And when I try and request individual conversations with strangers online, virtually, the success rate drops to like 5-10%. So it's almost it's the equivalent of what we would have done 50 years ago, which is knocking on doors. But I'm knocking on doors that are half open by putting myself in lots of environments, whether it's networking meetings, conferences, seminars, where everybody else is there to do the same thing. So the success rate of that absolute unqualified, but let's get it in the top of the pipeline is way easier than you might imagine. But because the gratification is potentially quite slow, it's still difficult to motivate yourself to do that with regularity, which is why you have to have those weekly activity KPIs.
No, for sure. Because I completely agree. I've had the same results. Like we're both members of like BNI. We both network generally. There's mutual benefit to having that conversation from the business you're trying to talk to your benefit. It's all about that awareness and having those conversations. Because what's your thought on? I don't know if I completely agree with this, but it's just it's something that was.
You're gonna be controversial.
No, not necessarily. Your network is your net worth.
Well, it's a nice buzzy, strap line.
Yeah.
To an extent, it's true, right? If you put it another way, I think that almost all business is founded on relationships, and you don't have relationships with people that aren't in your network.
For sure, it's one of the biggest things that going into it, at least. So I started like freelance in 2017. The business I'm working under now, 2020. From starting to where I am now, I was obviously building these conversations with people, but I think when I started compared to where I am now, I undervalued actually just how much of it is the relationship with people. Because like they say as well in networking, it's you ideally want to work with people who know, like, and trust you. Like what you were saying about when you're just requesting a conversation with someone, it's not necessarily about trying to force a sale down someone's throat. It starts with that awareness, get their intrigue, because then maybe it's like another conversation where you give them the offer, right? But it primarily, especially with like service businesses, it tends to come back to people buy from people. Yeah.
I think that growing your business is all about trust. And how do you build that trust? The reality is that an online footprint can develop credibility and brand awareness, but until that's been qualified with reviews or testimonials, then even if that's from a complete stranger, it lacks credibility. We've all done that thing where we look at a hotel, for example. Well, in fact, I've got a story for you. So I found myself in Blackburn about 6 months ago. I messed up my booking at the Premier Inn and had booked myself in for the night before I was due to arrive. It was full. There was no bookings, no hotels available anywhere apart from one hotel that came up on booking.com. And this hotel had zero footprint beyond its listing on booking.com. No website, no reviews, no TripAdvisor, no Google reviews, no Facebook reviews.
Scary.
And I'd had a drink, so I couldn't get in the car and drive out of town. Blackburn's not that close to anywhere, so it was not that I could have jumped in an Uber and 10 minutes later been in a hotel. So I had to take a punt on this business. It turned out by chance it was their first operational day. They'd opened their business that day. They'd been inspected by the chain of hotels they were affiliated with, and they said, "No, you're ready. Open the doors." About 2 hours before I'd rocked up, they'd put themselves available online, and I was customer number one. And the experience was great, and I gave them a review to try and get them off the ground and try and make things happen for them. They've gone on to great success. But my skepticism was deep because I needed you as a stranger and all the people behind the cameras here as strangers to have given a review to validate that there was trust. So even you can have a network with strangers, but that people buy from people thing is absolutely true. And in the case of online reviews and online footprint, those people that you trust, you don't even need to know them.
No.
But in terms of growing your business, of course, there's massive value in developing person-to-person relationships, whether that's online, whether that's face-to-face. Face-to-face is still the Rolls-Royce of building your network. But it's absolutely true, with very few notable exceptions. Even if you think about things like podcasts, they grow numbers because of their reviews. Every podcast will say like, subscribe, review. What they're basically saying is we need independent checkpoints to validate and point towards us as credible, good, likable, whatever.
Feeds off the algorithm as well, helps push it. But
absolutely.
I think that brings me on to a thought as well, that sales can be quite, well, how do you grow a business? How do you actually get more work in? It can be a bit overwhelming when you think about it. Some of the things you've just said there, you've listed a number of different things. There's the networking, there's the social proof from reviews. And I think when you get into it, or at least when you're trying to scale it and figure out what should I actually do, because you've only got so much time in a day. And if you've got work coming in, you're at least feeding yourself, but then you're trying to scale that, which is definitely something I've been experiencing this year more so. You've got that cruel cycle between, I need to do the activities, but then I also need to deliver on what I'm doing to a standard. And I think that was a question I asked you as well at one point, was we went through a few different things. What should we actually do? So for me, it's obviously whatever's going to be the most beneficial thing, or the best possible value out of time for the time you have, because you don't want to waste your time doing all sorts of manual tasks and there's things you can automate. But I think just as a foundation, whether you're selling a product or a service, going out and physically meeting people, even if you're selling a product and the majority of people you're networking with won't necessarily buy it, I think you learn a lot from it. It helps to refine your skill set a little bit, your pitch, seeing what people actually respond to. Because if you're selling a product, you don't necessarily get that kind of data. What are your thoughts on that, as far as like networking as a foundation? But if I was coming to you and I was like, Dave, I don't have time and I don't have a team, what should I do? How could you help me there, Dave?
Well, if you don't have the time to do networking?
I've got 5 hours a week to do sales activities. I can make time for the calls, but it's challenging for me to do that. What can I do in that kind of situation?
Well, I think if I was being honest with you, I would say nothing's going to happen until somebody sells something.
True.
Yeah. So whatever it is that you're working on in the remaining, let's say you're doing a 60-hour week then. Yeah. So in the other 55 hours, whatever it is that you're doing is going to end. It's going to come to a stop. I don't think any business in the world can look at one of their biggest clients and say, we've got that in perpetuity, unless it's, your brother, So I think you actually have to have a mindset change, whether you're a sole trader or whether you're a business that's got a big sales team. Nothing's going to happen until somebody sells something. And I've fallen into this trap myself. I was incredibly busy, sort of tail end of 2022, really, really busy. I thought, I've cracked this. Get to January, February, a few of those contracts have come to the end. It's starting to look a little bit more barren in terms of the activity in my calendar. And I'm thinking, well, what's gone wrong? I stopped selling as aggressively as I should have done. So, what I would say is that if you were a sole trader and your week is absolutely maxed, you need to find a way to push some of that activity into corners of the week where you can't sell, and then sell in the spaces that you can. So an awful lot of networking is happening first thing in the morning, early evening. You need to work out what your prime time is. And I met a really good guy, a sales speaker and trainer called Andy Preston. Fantastic guy. Look him up online. He's really impressive guy. And Andy's strapline is always cold calling or prospecting should be the first thing that goes in your calendar and the last thing that gets cancelled. The reality is it's normally the first thing that gets cancelled, because the only victim of its cancellation is going to be you in 6, 8, 12 weeks time when you've got nothing in your pipeline. So if I was your manager or if I was your sales geek, I would be looking at your calendar and saying, if 5 hours, is 5 hours enough? And if it's not, then we need to do more. But if we're aligned that 5 hours is enough, show me 5 hours worth of effort and show me what the outcomes of that are, because your pipeline will have nothing fall out the bottom of it if you're not putting fuel into the top. It's really that simple. It is a numbers game.
Yeah, no, for sure. And because I think, like I said, that was one of the biggest things I think I found daunting, at least when you're getting started with it, is you can put so much time into it, so much effort. Even if you're hitting those targets of spending 5 hours a day making those cold calls and you still get nowhere, that is just the nature of the game. And I think that was one of the biggest things that really reassured me to just keep going, that it is just, it's hard at times. But learn from it as well, because as well, like, and it comes back to the marketing as well. The more understanding the niche, exactly who you're calling, going through that list and their pain point versus the offer and the problem that's going to solve. Those are some of the biggest things that have really made a difference to at least mindset. Because I think mindset, don't know if you'd agree, is like one of the biggest things. So another thing because another sales course that I went on, I've realized I'm too emotionally attached to the action of doing it, but I need to pull myself away as though it's just a job.
It's just a thing that you're selling, right?
It's a thing, and that's one of the questions I wanted to go on to for you now. Like, from when you got started, is that something you particularly had to tackle when you were just getting started in the sales game, before you got into when you scaled it to you were making sure everyone else was hitting their numbers? What was the biggest challenge you found getting into it?
So mindset and goal set. So mindset is, I always found it easy to perform in teams. I'm not the world's most competitive person. A lot of salespeople are coin operated. You put money in or potential of money in, and the effort happens. My ego was always driven by not being bottom or not being middle. I didn't necessarily have to be top, but I wanted to be in that top third. I never had to be performance managed. Nobody ever had to have a word with me about not doing enough, because the threat of being worse than you was enough to keep me honest. But I learned something really interesting around mindset. I think is positivity. Goal set is positivity linked to an objective. And I met a really interesting guy who had worked out, and this is something you might want to try actually, had worked out how much ground level activity needed to be done to get a win. So he knew his numbers. He knew, let's say that he needed to do 50 cold calls to create 5 prospects to get 1 win. From a mindset and goal set perspective, he inverted the whole thing. And he, on a day when he didn't want to do any cold calling or didn't want to do any prospecting or networking, monetized the no's. So what I mean by that is, rather than saying I need to do 100 cold calls or 100 meetings to get 1 win, he worked out that every no was worth £18.50 to him. So he would say, right, I'm going to go and get a morning's worth of no's, knowing full well that in there somewhere was the yes that was actually worth something. So he would almost tick through his sort of totalizer. If you imagine a thermometer outside, the church roof fund, he would be ticking through his progress of no's, knowing that the yes was in there somewhere. So mindset is really, really important, which again brings us back to the accountability piece that we were talking about earlier on, which is, some people are totally motivated, self-motivated. They skip out of bed in the morning, slide down the banister and go and start smashing out efforts that they need to do to be successful. But a lot of people don't have that mindset. And so that's where you end up with managers.
Yeah.
Who bring the accountability, because if you're going to let yourself down financially, you don't want to let yourself down reputationally. You don't let me down, because on Friday I'm going to ask you how much activity you've done. Yeah. So it gets done.
I wonder what's holding yourself to account. I think I'm just trying to figure out the difference there, because like when you've got your manager on your ass and it's a job, the motivation finds you. But when you're the business owner and you're behind that, there's a big difference between someone pushing you and on your ass about it versus you doing it. Because obviously, as a business owner, it's like, you've got to get up early, but then the alarm comes and goes occasionally. It's easier to sort of hold yourself to account. So there's that discipline as well, which is obviously, of course, really important. And it comes back to the mindset as well. But I think just summarising, we're at about the 30-minute mark.
Yeah.
Summarising then for anyone who's listening, and jump in if I miss any points. I think knowing exactly what you're offering and who it has value to, found that really validating, because you're not pestering people. The mindset as well is you are helping people. This is something that someone will benefit from.
People don't buy things they don't need.
Exactly.
As a general rule, yeah. There is people will buy things that they want, but in business, as a general rule, there is you are there to help. You are fixing a problem. You're addressing a gap. I don't imagine you've ever signed a client who absolutely didn't need what you had, because it's difficult for you to pin value on that.
Yeah.
What you've got to do is keep finding the guys. You need to keep working through the guys that don't need your help yet, until you do find the guys that need your help now.
Sure. And I think in that case, if they don't know that they need it, it's how do you frame that offer from their perspective, which comes into from an email strategy. If you're reaching out to people who don't know you, if you've got a well-tailored offer to their specific need, tapping into their specific niche, that's when you can start to leverage better results, at least from the emails. But then just the other points, just summarizing it again, numbers game, out of 100, you might hopefully get 20 calls, you might hopefully get one person that converts. So just understanding that and how to scale it and then how to improve that. Probably the biggest thing that made a difference to how I've been doing it anyway. And then final thought then, once you actually get that call, what do you think, is it, because I go into, well, for some of the calls, depends on the circumstance, I've got a presentation with an offer.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would say absolutely 100%, don't go in without a presentation? Or is it okay to just go in with, let's just have a chat and then follow up with documentation?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the nature of your relationship, and you'll have a sense of what your customer, your potential customer, how much they can visualize what you do. So when we're talking about our sales training, I like to show them a few slides, primarily to give them a sense of how we feel. But what we've also learned at Sales Geek over time is that when a customer's starting to express interest, putting together a big detailed proposal tends to add a step to the sales process that with hindsight we've learned not to include. So I always think about the TV show Countdown. You've got the 30-second timer clicking down. I think of that as the window to sell. The customer, when they've picked up the phone or they've given you their time, they're giving you permission to sell to them. And every second that ticks by, your window to sell to them is closing. And what we've learned in what we do is that when the interest is shown, we have to sweep them off their feet there and then. There will be some people that ask for a proof source, a presentation, a brochure, whatever. So if that's the case, then we put it together for them. But when we look at our metrics, when we introduce the use of that proof source, actually our effectiveness goes down, which only goes to underline the people buy from people point.
Yeah. I think if you'd agree as well that the more information you give someone, the more chance they are to just procrastinate the whole thing.
Yeah. But there's also, and you'll know this, there's a bunch of information that shows that the sales process has got longer and longer and longer, but actually marketing own more and more and more of it. So I was talking to you earlier on about TripAdvisor reviews and online touch points, validation points. Yet the reality is now that the last place I look if I'm going to stay at a hotel is that hotel's website. Yeah, I look everywhere else. It's unusual for us to not do a bunch of research, end up going down that sort of Google wormhole, looking at a product, looking at a service. And then it's almost down to, right, I've decided I'm probably going to buy from this business. Let me see whether or not I like the person that's fronting it. The days of us being sat at a desk in an electrical store being sold a tumble dryer, they're gone. That's become totally transactional for most people now. And that's the same elsewhere, but the reality is that we do still end up with probably 20 or 30% of the sales process time the customer's willing to invest. The salesperson still gets about 20% of that time. So it's really important that we're impactful. But in terms of proof sources and presentations, they've probably seen it all. They've probably done all that on their own time. You just haven't seen it.
Things change, things adapt, new technologies come in, and importantly as well, as you just pointed out, people's buying habits change. How do they buy? When do they buy? Which also goes into it as well as far as how do you actually get that conversation with them. Apologies if you already answered this, but did you leave that hotel their first review?
I did.
Nice.
I did, and it's really nice. It's really nice because obviously they've got some kind of phone system. So I left them a review, and then I called them about 2 hours later to say, I've left you your first review. And even to this day, if I ring them, they've obviously got caller ID, and they go, "Hi, Dave." It's really, really nice. It's amazing. The hotel's lovely. I should give it a name check. It's Hotel 99 in Blackburn Town Centre, independently owned. Really nice place, really nice people. But I keep telling this story because I became their first customer. The experience was really great. It was really weird. I don't know why I feel proud of being their first customer. It was a fluke. They looked after me so well. And to this day, I have lots of colleagues. Our head office is in Blackburn. We have lots of meetings there. And I'm forever recommending this hotel. And what I've noticed is actually their price point's gone up and up and up and up because they have got pristine hundreds of 5-star reviews, because they're doing something a tiny bit different from all of the other chains, which is that it's very personalised. Love it.
I'd be quite happy with myself if I'd been the first customer as well, because where might they be without your review?
It was a delight. Great people.
You've made their business for them. So
you want to flip it?
You can do if you'd like. Maybe a bit of a back and forth, but you've prepped a list of questions, Dave. So I wonder if you've got anything you want to ask me. So what I was thinking for this anyway, sorry to interrupt, I think your sales on marketing, there's a bit
You notice I've suddenly gone very defensive now that we're talking about marketing.
Oh dear, you're on the attack now.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
it's all your fault.
Any questions relating to that? But I think the whole concept of this episode anyway is a little bit of like, what is the difference, sales versus marketing?
Well, so I think that even for somebody in sales who probably lives next door to marketing, marketing is still alchemy to us to some extent. What would you say is the most common misconception that you have to correct or persuade against when people talk to you about what they think marketing is?
Firstly, got a great book I could recommend called Alchemy by
a
really famous marketer. One of the biggest things I would say is people's expectations of what it actually takes, what you have to invest, time, money, resources to get certain results, especially from selling it from a perspective. What I'm trying to really master now is what is the best offer I can offer someone that they can see the value without question, because fairly saturated market, people offering this as a service, because there's huge demand for it. There's hundreds of new businesses made every month, but trying to show people actually what goes in and then what we would charge as a service to actually achieve those results. Because, for example, like I started out with just doing content for businesses. First project I sold was a video project to a fairly successful company. But I realized immediately that these guys aren't buying a video, they're buying a result. And especially when people come to me asking, like I pulled back a little bit from the content, but when people are buying one thing and then they ask questions of like, why did it not do this? Or no matter how clear you've been, managing people's expectations on what is the result you want to get versus what you need to put in to get that. So I've learned that that's the number one thing I'll start with a conversation on a sales conversation is, what do you want to achieve? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's in the way of that? And where are you currently placed in the market? Because if you can identify that, you can identify where do they want to be, not just from their business perspective. Why are they in business? Where do they want to be in 10 years? Because then you can lay that roadmap and you can work with where's their budget now? What can they actually put into this realistically? Because you can start with one or two things. Let's get some quick wins. Let's scale that. And then what are some of the more long-term foundations, such as like an SEO perspective or a consistent content strategy? There's things that are going to get you short-term results. There's things that are going to get you long-term results, which will compound over time. But then that will keep going, because that you can't beat that. Once you've got your audience, or once you've got the ranking on Google, you will just get traffic because you've already laid that foundation.
But But if I understand you correctly, what I think you're telling me, and it's the same for us at Sales Geek, is that the first thing we really need to establish is what's the objective.
100%.
Are you surprised at how frequently the customer hasn't defined their objective when you ask that question?
No. If they had identified it, we might have less business. So that's why it's a saturated market for agencies to be able to offer this, because it's so easy now to get started with a business. You can get started with a business with almost no money, and you can literally just start it in a couple hours. The number one thing is you've just got to make sure that there's someone who's going to buy what it is you're offering. And with that in mind, when it comes to actually either you're just getting started with marketing or you're a bigger company and you just need to scale what you're doing, you can build your business off the back of just networking and just people you know. Depending on what it is, it might just be family and friends to start with, but that will give you that good kick to get started. But then, like when we might want to employ your services and we need to scale the sales results, it's the same with marketing. It's identify. They may not know because they've not had that need to know, but once you've identified what's the end goal, what's the destination, you're almost working backwards from that to actually see who's purchased that, where was the first touch point, and why did they buy it? Was it a pain? Was it a luxury? What was it? So, but once you've done that, you've got then a much clearer roadmap. And sometimes, you can just have that conversation that, because I think I've obsessed over like what I do. So it does surprise me, I think, still, that I'm quite knowledgeable, and just having a good conversation with someone as far as like, here's where you are, here's where you want to be, here's a roadmap, how useful that can be for people, just to give them a bit of a taste of like, here's the things you could be doing, because there's so many different things, but then breaking it down into short term or long term, how far can you stretch that budget. So I think it does still surprise me, but also I get excited when people have less knowledge of it.
Oh, no doubt. When somebody's objectives aren't clear, it's far easier for the likes of you and I to make an impactful intervention with that business, because you're bringing clarity that they struggle to achieve themselves. And some people need that help, some people don't need that help. Do you ever find yourself with somebody coming to you with a very clear objective, but you think they're not right?
It's usually, in my experience, they're usually very certain of their product or service, and they're very clear on, they know it's got value because they love the product or service, but they haven't necessarily got enough of the proof to say that there's a need for this in the market. So, which also then comes into, are you selling something that already has a demand in the market that you can research and measure? Or are you bringing something into the market that people don't really know, which is going to be a little bit more challenging, because then you've got to sell from a perspective of what is this person's perceived value of this? Because if there's none of it, you're either using keywords that will at least hook them into intrigue, or you're then going into how can I actually just raise that awareness of this thing that people should be aware of?
Okay, cool. I've got because I've got a sales background, and in my past life, I've seen sales organizations I've worked for have fantastic synergy-based connected relationships with marketing, where we've held hands together and gone and executed. I've also seen massive misconceptions in the sales world about what marketing is or isn't, or should or shouldn't achieve. So I wanted to throw some of those at you.
Okay.
And they're sort of short, sharp marketing misconceptions. And maybe you can try and give me some short, sharp corrections or confirmations, because these misconceptions might not be misconceptions. Sure. You ready? Okay, so marketing is advertising.
Yes, I guess in a way, just different ways of doing it.
Okay, those marketing leads were rubbish.
They can be.
So, and let me expand upon that a second. So, when salespeople say marketing leads weren't very good, or qualified marketing leads weren't very good, I've often found that sales expectation is that that customer is basically ready to sign. That's their expectation. Can you help me understand whether that's a fair expectation or not?
If you throw money at a problem, you're going to get attention. It's going to be seen by people, guaranteed, and you can see how many people you've at least had seen your ad on social media, seen the billboard, seen the TV ad. But that doesn't mean that they're the right people. That doesn't mean that they're actually the ideal target. And they may be open to purchasing, but as you've just identified, they might just be a bad fit for the company because the company's service itself, service or product, might actually be niched down to something that can't tailor to everyone that comes through that pipeline.
Okay. This is a bit of an obvious one. This isn't a new observation to make, but I see it happening time and time and time again. I don't know whether you encounter this, but a business owner or a person responsible for the website in a business does all of their work on a desktop or a laptop and doesn't consider that almost all of the views they're going to be getting is on mobile. Do you encounter that at all? Because I see it again and again and again, where the website is absolutely optimized for a big wide screen, and then you try and utilize it. And I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, we're based in the Midlands, Coventry City, mad scramble, big success. This is going to age badly, depending upon the outcome of the game in the next few hours. Mad scramble for tickets, and the website has a zoom in on this map to select your seat. Doesn't work on iOS.
Doesn't work.
Just doesn't work on iPhone. It's a classic example of, I'm sure it looks great on the Mac in the office.
It's a massive oversight. And that comes into the journey of the buyer as well. So coming into their niche, their need, what are the touch points, but what are the decisions and the steps they take to make that purchase? Now, are we talking like a business owner that would make that mistake? Because if a website developer's making that mistake, that's a stretch.
And I should say it's a Ticketmaster website, so it's not a small local. It's not me or you trying to play Billy Big Boots with ticketing. This is the biggest ticketing company in the world. Their seat selection engine doesn't work on the second most popular mobile platform in the world.
It sounds like Ticketmaster needs some help from some sales and marketing.
It's not Ticketmaster. It's time to save them.
You can see where people come from through the traffic. You can see if they're coming through desktop. You can see if they're coming through mobile. It's more or less, it sort of varies between 50-50. Sometimes it might be more phone. Sometimes it might be more computer. But our phone is a computer. You can do just about anything that the computer can do. It's just sometimes you want a bigger screen, but it's that accessibility of it, the convenience of it. More and more people are using their phone to purchase, to research a hotel, to jump on Amazon to purchase something there and then, or sign up for something, purchase a ticket from Ticketmaster. If you don't have that accessibility to be able to do it, or that responsiveness, what I mean by responsiveness is that it works wired, but then it knows what it's supposed to do when it's just on a phone, then you're really reducing the amount of results you can get, because you're alienating the people that are coming from phone and prioritizing the people that are coming from computer. So it's a number one thing you've got to do. And it, just quickly on something like with branding, that's also why it's important to have responsive branding as well. So you might have, if I'm viewing, if I've got a logo printed on the wall here, full logo, big. Or if I'm wearing it on a t-shirt, just an icon, like you are now with Sales Geek.
Calling me iconic.
Iconic.
Great.
But when it's got to be able to stretch. It's got to be able to shrink, and that's just because the market has to respond to technology. So and that comes down to as well, like what we were touching on, that things change. Think like how things are now certainly wasn't how things were 50 years ago. There's still some similarities, but we don't know what things are going to be like in the next 20 years, the way things are going. But you've got to learn to adapt, and you've got to know, you've just got to be on the ball really with like, what are the trends? Where are things going, and how should I adapt to that? Otherwise, you are going to be alienating a portion of the traffic that you get.
Yeah, but there's also, I understand that. So that's interesting for me, because there's plenty of case studies of businesses following trends and being early adopters. And there's plenty of examples of businesses not following trends and getting left behind. And then there are also some examples of businesses staying true to their core and reaping the benefits. So, yeah, I think a great example might be someone like Primark, who through COVID had to shut their stores. They don't have an online offering at all. So they effectively paused the business for a year, 18 months in various periodical steps. So as we come into this world of AI and ChatGPT, and it seems that it's been coming for years, but all of a sudden it feels like the launch has happened. How do you see that impacting how you can help businesses? And should we be embracing, should we be resisting, or should we be cautious, in your opinion?
Just on the AI stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, well, firstly, Primark's an interesting example, because I didn't realise until COVID that they only had physical stores and they refused to sell online. Certainly makes them vulnerable. Same with like Blockbuster refusing to stream. But it's interesting. We'll see how that business model goes, because they've obviously got the huge flagship shop in Birmingham. So I do keep an eye on it, because it is interesting that they just outright refuse to do that. As far as AI is concerned, and I love talking about this because I find it so interesting, resist at your own detriment, I would say. It is here. It doesn't seem to be slowing down. It doesn't seem like it's going away. Proof of concept is there. Like, we know it works. And if at the very least it improves your efficiency and gives you more time back on things that you would have to be doing manually, there's a benefit to it. I think the biggest risk that people are at least concerned about is it's going to take jobs. It's maybe going to devalue a lot of things, sure. But with every change in industry comes new jobs that we might not even be able to predict right now. Like some of the jobs that exist now that didn't exist like before the Industrial Revolution. It's just these stages of change. But if we accept the fact that it's here and it's probably not going anywhere, then if you don't, sooner or later you're going to have to get used to it, because it's either going to be something that you utilize and you benefit from, or it's something that is just always going to be in the background of your life. Like, I mean, I use my dad as an example. He's a massive technophobe. He used to say, "You'll never catch me with a mobile phone."
Yeah.
He carries a mobile phone every day now.
Yeah.
It's like, it's here.
Yeah.
Get used to it.
And don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that people resist it. I'm really interested in the ethics of it, but also the legalities of it. So if I give you an example, we might go down a wormhole here.
There's so many wormholes on this.
So a couple of weeks ago, someone sent me a link, and it was a YouTube video of the Beach Boys song, God Only Knows. You know it?
Are we going to say this was AI made?
Well, it was sung by Paul McCartney, who has never sung that song. To the best of my knowledge, never sung that song. Really authentic sounding Paul McCartney. So basically it was a Beach Boys song, but sung by the Beatles. If you listen really closely, bit of John Lennon AI in there as well. So it's a nice bit of fun. Really nice way of showcasing what it can do. Who owns that? Yeah, who owns that? And we've got two cases. We've got Paul McCartney alive, probably sat there going, hang on a second, I need to mitigate against this or embrace it. And you've probably got the estate of John Lennon going, hang on a second. There's no contract, I believe, in the world at the minute that's covering this. And just as a follow-up, I was listening to a podcast last week with Tom Hanks, who was talking about how he's currently in the process with the studios of trying to work out how do they manage his likeness, his voice, his appearance. Toy Story 13 may come long after Tom Hanks's demise. They may want to use his voice. But interestingly, what they didn't talk about in the podcast is that in Forrest Gump, one of Tom Hanks's films, there's actually John Lennon's image being revoiced with a John Lennon impersonator in sort of like, almost like a chat show type scenario. So actually Tom Hanks has been party to someone being retrospectively reworked, albeit it wasn't AI at the time. It was obviously just a bit of animation and a voice. But you see the wormhole that I'm worried about. It's like, so if you were to do some work on ChatGPT to help develop something for a customer, is that your intellectual property? Is it your customers? Is it ChatGPT's? Is that clear at the moment?
I have a comprehensive answer for that.
Okay.
That goes down 3 wormholes. Number 1, you mentioned the music industry. They're angry about that because they're not monetizing it yet. As soon as they can, they will, and they're not going to worry about it. But it's, as you say, it's the copyright of that. So there's already been some examples that have come out.
But they own the copyright of the historical recordings, not of sound-alikes from, is it not the family? The estate?
Well, the rules then...
The artist?
Yeah, sure. And then the copyright's going to be around that. Like, if I could win that case if I can prove that, yes, that is without a doubt mimicked from this person who I have copyright to their voice, their likeness. So some stuff has come out. It's people have been really impressed. Like there was that Drake one with I think The Weeknd, and they scrapped that. No, absolutely not. We're not making money from that. Which maybe wasn't necessarily what they thought about it. They just obviously want to keep their work. Completely understandable. Then there's other artists. There's an artist called Grimes. I think she was dating Musk for a little while. She's like, do it, take my likeness, make this stuff. But she's also huge on the technological stage.
Probably doesn't need the money either.
Yeah, I'm sure Drake doesn't either. But once they can monetize, it's going to be less of an issue. It's the same with like when people Napster and people streaming music. It was a problem until they could monetize it, and you can still get music for free, but they've adapted to it. Artists are someone that they're going to really take a hit. So my background is more of like sort of mixed media art. So I know how long it takes to draw out a really detailed image, especially one that you could then be selling to a commercial client. We're talking days, weeks. It takes a chatbot out like seconds to do it. And here's something, you were talking about the morals, the ethics of it. That chatbot has been trained on your work as well. So there's cases like just recently I was listening to something about this where artists who in particular already have their following, they already have their people know their work. It's iconic. Their chatbots saw these AI text-to-image generators have been trained on their work. So people might go in and they want a certain piece of work for their wall, and they want it in the style of the artist that they like. Who owns that now? Clearly that's iconic. If someone were to hand do it, they might struggle and you'd be able to tell the difference. But this robot has been able to do it almost exactly as I've done it. There's a risk obviously to artists now, because if I'm a business owner and I need this piece of work and I can just type in the prompt and get it in 30 seconds, why do I need to pay an artist to do it? That's obviously going to be a huge shift in the industry. And then finally, ChatGPT, just the chatbots. I need some copywriting. I type in what I want, it feeds it back out. Doesn't get it perfect every time, and it still requires some effort. They call it artificial intelligence. It's simulated intelligence. It's not.
Yeah.
It looks intelligent, but the chatbot.
It's just joining the dots.
Yeah.
Between everything that we already knew, it's
Absolutely.
just all connected it together. Yeah.
It's a high-end plagiarism, because that chatbot has been taught on all of the work that it's a learning algorithm. So it is trained, it's given a load of information, it understands and it learns. And then when it's given certain prompts, tasks to do, it can then output that. So it looks, I was listening to a podcast, it was a Rogan one with someone recently, I forget the name of the guy, but he was saying that, I like his perspective on it anyway, that it seems intelligent. It almost seems like you're talking to someone, because in many respects you are, because it's feeding out something that a human has already put out, which then obviously brings into question, okay, well, how much of that is plagiarism? How much of that is legal? So Google is on the ball with this. If you, which anyone who's doing blogs for their website, if you need to check whether or not how much of that blog is actually can be detected for AI, because Google is keeping an eye on that, and it will not actually it's not going to prioritize content
that's non-human.
Well, that is clearly plagiarized. That's all it's checking for.
Okay.
So that's something you've got to be aware of. So I think chatbot, like I procrastinate written tasks more than anything else. So if nothing else, it has sped up my process, because then it just gives me the foundation to work from. So if it's a long written task, I've got the structure to it, but I've still got to reword it. If I'm just brainstorming, it gives me the list of ideas, and then I can just keep prompting it until I come to a conclusion. It speeds it up. It speeds up the process. I've got one more point. If you
no, go for it. Go because I've got a follow-up question
Okay.
On this. So yeah, I'm going somewhere with this.
Final point on at least where currently we're seeing huge shifts in industry. Have you heard of the AI lawyer called Do Not Pay?
No.
I think he was a college student in the States. He was annoyed with the rates he had to pay for solicitors. So I think in quite a short space of time, just coded this chatbot.
That's using, I guess, written law as all the reference points, right? So it probably knows more about case law than anybody else in the world.
And it's winning cases, and it's working. And that then brings into the question, what if I want to bring this chatbot into the courtroom? Why do I need a solicitor?
So is it winning cases by making a case that means the case gets dropped and settled? It's not going into the courtroom, right?
I think, if I'm right,
it's basically sending a shitty letter that makes someone back down.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've spoken to and worked with.
Sending somebody a legally sound letter that's making someone back down.
Typically, that's all it takes. Like I work with and have had plenty of conversations with solicitors. I think I'm right in saying that in most cases, the goal is to avoid the courtroom. And sometimes all it takes is just a scary sounding letter with a lot of legal jargon, which then brings into question or refines maybe the actual value of having that human element of solicitor. But then now it's scary, I suppose, for them, because people can say don't need to spend that on the time or what people charge for their time as a solicitor. So there's an accessibility now for people to be able to dispute a parking ticket is one of the things on the website.
Okay. And so the reason I asked you the AI question is fill in the gaps here for me. There are multiple pillars of what a marketing company does. And I'm going to guess at a couple and you can fill in the gap. So there's branding, SEO, help me with the others. So the lead generation,
PPC marketing, email outbound, social media marketing, content marketing.
So do you think that AI will become a distinct pillar of the product portfolio that you offer, or will it sit in the background and support the existing pillars?
It's already a huge part of...
I'm asking the question too late.
As soon as ChatGPT came on the market in November of last year, agency owners that jumped on it early saw the value in it immediately, already adopted it for website copy, ad copy, blog writing. The chatbot it's a tool, but I think of it as like a member of the team almost. It's because someone's paying for the output essentially, and maybe it devalues the service a little bit. But when it comes to because this is a question as well where I think some people then try and skim the prices of what you're doing and like really what's the value in it if I can do it myself. Point is, you're not doing it yourself, and regardless, and for as long as there is going to be someone who has to physically put in what they need to get the right outcome, there's still going to be value in someone offering that as a service.
There's going to be specialism, right? So I could probably knock together a website. It might not be decent. I can launch that website. It won't be optimized. It won't get the clicks. It won't. Its SEO will need work. Being able to do the foundational thing doesn't make you an expert.
No.
And I think I think there's going to be expertise that becomes very sellable. But as I say, I'm just intrigued as to whether it becomes an ingredient in what you do, or actually it's going to become a sellable product, being an AI enabler, implementer.
Both. It's a layer of operations for how to meet the deliverables currently. There's a member of my team who has pointed out that they're already offering prompt writing as a course that they'll train people in. And I've got someone in my network who works in IT who is building a business model around training people on AI and offering it as like a package offer.
Okay.
So both.
Like AI for dummies.
In all aspects. And there's an example of one I suppose we could have predicted, but there's something that's now a service in the market that wasn't there previously. It's 12:16.
Yeah, we're done.
This has been great. Thank you for your time, Dave. I hope there's been a mutual value. Do we give a shout out to this podcast, Julie? Because
absolutely. So we're recording here today at, in fact, with the very first customers, although there's going to be plenty of other customer sign up, of 22 Productions, which is an offshoot of 22 Digital here in Coventry. New podcast studio. It's fantastic. It's a Fargo Village. Team are incredibly supportive. They're all stood behind the camera now, silently waving at us and blushing because and giving us a few other gestures as well because we've overrun our allotted time. But yeah, they really, really worth looking at. These guys have been really generous hosts to us, and I'm sure we'll be here again in the future.
I think so. This has been great, and who knows, when we next catch up, things might have changed a little bit more. And I think we could be their first reviews as well. I'll let you go first so you can add that to your roster as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, we will be their first external points of reference, give them an online review. And, nice to hang out, Dan. Cheers.
Pleasure, mate.